Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take all the sources you send us, your articles, notes, forum threads, all that stuff, and really boil it down to the essential insights for you.
Basically, we do the digging so you don't have to.
Exactly. And today we're tackling something really specific, actually, but it's a classic for RC fans. We're doing a deep dive into upgrading the legendary Tamiya ORV chassis.
Ah, yeah. The Frog, the Blackfoot, Monster Beetle. Those awesome rear-wheel drive kits from back in the day.
That's them, real icons. But, they can definitely benefit from some modern upgrades, especially if you're thinking about running like a brushless motor or just something hotter than the stock silver can.
Oh, for sure. The original drivetrains weren't really designed for today's power levels. Upgrades are almost essential if you want to run them hard.
Definitely. And that brings us right to the question you sent over. It's about a really common performance upgrade combo, putting in an MIP Super Bowl differential, along with a set of Xtra Speed G45 steel CVD drive shafts.
Okay, yeah. Popular choices. Both are known for improving durability and smoothing things out.
Right. But your specific question was, are those little black O-rings, sometimes people call them rubber donuts, are they actually necessary when you install the specific combination of MIP Diff and Xtra Speed CVDs?
Interesting question. Because you see those O-rings mentioned sometimes, but are they needed here?
That's what we need to figure out. We've gone through the product info, the instructions you sent, some forum discussions. Let's sift through it and see what the deal is with these little rubber rings.
Okay, but before we jump right into the diff and the shafts, there's a quick point we need to clear up from the source material. It's about a part number.
Oh, right. Good point. In your original query, you mentioned the MIP Super Bowl diff as part number #132
Yeah, and when we look through the documentation and product listings you provided specifically for the Tamiya ORV chassis, well, the number that kept coming up consistently as the correct MIP ball diff is actually #16210.
We did search for #13210 in, an RC context for these Tamiyas. And honestly, nothing relevant came up. It seemed to point to some completely different industrial parts.
So, just for clarity, everything we're about to discuss regarding the MIP diff, it's based on the information for the #1C210 part. We're assuming that's the one you meant. And, the fundamental design, how the drive shafts connect, that's likely identical anyway for any MIP diff for this chassis.
Makes sense. Got to be talking about the right part. Okay, MIP tag 16210 it is. Let's start there. We looked closely at the installation instructions that came with your sources for this diff.
And they're detailed, really detailed. MIP does a good job walking you through the assembly, putting the diff balls in, the rings, the thrust bearing, making sure everything's greased properly.
It's a precise bit of kit, but here's the thing that jumped out straight away. Looking at those instructions, the diagrams, the parts list,
What's that?
there is absolutely no mention anywhere of using an O-ring inside the outdrive cups, the cups on the diff where the drive shafts actually slot in.
Huh. Really? None at all?
Nope. Zero depiction, zero instruction to add one there. We even double-checked against another MIP diff manual for a different car just to see. Same story. Their focus is all internal to the diff mechanism itself.
Okay, so purely based on MIP's own documentation, they don't specify or seem to require an O-ring for cushioning the drive shaft in the outdrive cup.
Right. And if you look at what retailers list as being in the MIP #16210 kit, you get the diff balls, the rings, bearings, hardware, the metal outdrives, but no little rubber O-rings for the cups.
MIP is known for, pretty tight tolerances and precision engineering. So the fact they omit them suggests they believe their diff works as intended without them, at least with drive shafts that meet certain specs.
And think about this. The MIP #16210 diff is designed to drop into the Tamiya ORV gearbox and work with other common parts, like Tamiya's own optional hop-up universal shaft kit. That's part #53908.
Right, the pin drive universals.
Exactly. And guess what? That Tamiya universal shaft kit also doesn't appear to include these specific cushioning O-rings for the diff cups.
Okay, so neither MIP nor Tamiya in their related kits seem to be including or calling for these O-rings at that specific spot.
Which suggests the standard expectation is that the fit between the MIP diff outdrives and compatible shafts, like Tamiya's universals, is good enough without them.
So the whole idea of needing an O-ring might come more from maybe mixing different aftermarket brands, like MIP diffs with the Xtra Speed shafts potentially. Or maybe if your gearbox housings or bearings are a bit worn.
Exactly. Which leads us perfectly to the other half of your upgrade equation. The Xtra Speed G45 steel CVD drive shafts, that's part number XSTA29121.
Okay, let's look at those. What did the product info say?
Well, checking the retailer listings and product pages you sent for these specific Xtra Speed CVDs, the listed package contents are consistently just universals, 2PCs.
Just the CVDs themselves.
Yep, no mention of any O-rings being included with the Xtra Speed shafts either.
So, same story again. Manufacturer doesn't seem to include them or list them as part of this specific kit.
Officially, no. So you'd think, okay, MIP doesn't include them for the diff, Xtra Speed doesn't include them with the shafts. Case closed, right? You don't need them.
But knowing RC forums, I bet there's more to it.
You nailed it. This is where it gets really interesting because we found some specific user feedback in those Tamiya Club forum threads you shared, really relevant stuff.
Okay, what did the community have to say? This is often where the practical truth comes out.
Totally. So there was this discussion specifically about installing these exact Xtra Speed XSTA29121 universals into a monster Beetle, which, uses the same ORV gearbox.
Perfect comparison then.
And one user made a very direct observation after fitting them. I've got the quote right here, they said. I did think when I first installed them into the cup joints, there seemed to be a bit more space slop compared to the Tamiya ones. Maybe like the cups needed another O-ring inside.
Whoa, okay, so someone actually felt slough when putting these specific CVDs into the diff cups. Enough to immediately think, maybe an O-ring would help here.
Exactly, and they continue. But when I put the wheels back on, it does seem like that slop has gone. Which is also interesting. Maybe assembly compresses things a bit. But the key takeaway is that initial feeling of unexpected play.
That's huge, because it goes beyond the parts list. It's real-world fitment perception. Even if the manufacturer doesn't specify an O-ring, this user's hands-on experience suggests there might be, let's say, a practical benefit to using one with this specific combination.
It really highlights that potential difference between design intent and the reality of stacking tolerances when you mix brands. MIP makes the diff, Xtra Speed makes the CVDs. Maybe there's just a tiny bit more play when they meet compared to, say, MIP diffs with Tamiya shafts.
And other users in that same thread were generally really positive about the Xtra Speed CVDs, weren't they? Mentioning they were much quieter and smoother running.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People noted a big improvement over stock dog bones, or even the Tamiya Universal. Someone literally said it was a night and day difference in terms of sound. So the CVDs themselves are considered a good upgrade.
But that observation about the initial space slop is the critical piece for your question. It suggests that even if Xtra Speed doesn't include O-rings and MIP doesn't require them, there might still be a reason to consider using them based on the actual fit you get.
It moves from manufacturer required to user-implemented optimization.
Right. So let's talk about why people use these O-rings and drive cups generally. What are they actually doing in there?
Good Colton. Their main job in RC drivetrains, when you put them inside a diff-out drive cup or even a wheel axle cup, is to act as a cushion.
A cushion for the end of the drive shaft, right? Whether it's a dog bone pin or the barrel of a CVD.
Exactly. They stop direct metal-on-metal impact between the end of the shaft and the bottom of the cup. But maybe more importantly, especially for this slop issue, they take up extra space.
So they reduce play.
Yes. They primarily reduce axial play. That's the annoying in and out movement of the drive shaft in the cup. They can sometimes help a bit with radial play, side-to-side wobble too. One source called it cushioning the drive shafts in the drive cups. Simple as that.
And by taking up that slack and centering the shaft better, I guess they could also reduce wear on the drive slots in the cups over time.
Potentially, yeah. And for older style dog bones, it helps keep them from popping out at extreme angles, though that's less of an issue with captured CVDs like the Xtra Speeds, but reducing slop is key. Another user mentioned wanting to locate the dog bone more precisely using them.
Less slop, less banging around. Probably makes for a quieter drivetrain too, right? Even if the CVDs themselves are smoother.
Definitely contributes to a quieter, smoother feel overall. Now think about the Tamiya ORV chassis specifically. It's a beloved but, vintage design.
Tolerances maybe weren't quite as tight back then as on a modern race kit.
Right. And the stock dog bones are kind of known for developing slop over time. So even though you're upgrading to a nice ball diff and smooth CVDs, if there's still some play right there at the connection point.
But adding an O-ring to snug things up seems like it fits the whole goal of the upgrade, making the drivetrain more precise and robust.
Exactly. And it's not some weird hack. Using O-rings or sometimes little foam inserts or springs in drive cups to eliminate slop. That's a super common tuning technique in the RC world. People do it all the time to, as one source said, remove any slop in the driveline.
It's just part of fine-tuning, which really shows how a hobbyist knowledge and practice often builds on or even modifies the baseline manufacturer setup.
Absolutely. Oh, and one important distinction we should make, just so there's no confusion.
What's that?
These cushioning O-rings we're talking about, they are totally different from the O-rings used to seal oil inside gear differential.
Oh, right. Like Tamiya's VG O-rings, those special blue or black ones, hashtag 42374 or hashtag 42259. Those are specifically for keeping diff oil from leaking out of sealed gear diffs.
Yeah. Your MIP Superball diff isn't an oil-filled gear diff. It uses grease. It's not sealed in that way. The O-rings we're discussing are purely mechanical, just little rubber donuts to take up space and cushion impact inside the drive cup. Different material, different purpose entirely.
Good clarification. Definitely don't want someone trying to stuff a diff sealing O-ring in there.
Wouldn't work well. Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. Based on everything in your sources, what's the clear recommendation for your specific MIP diff and Xtra Speed CVD combo?
All right, let's break it down. First, the official word. For the MIP Super Bowl diff, hashtag 16210, MIP's instructions and the kit contents. They show O-rings are not required or included by them for the outdrive cups.
And for the Xtra Speed G45 steel CVDs, hashtag XSTA29121, product info says O-rings are not included with these shafts either.
So, strictly answering your question, are they necessary? Based purely on what the manufacturers provide and specify, the answer is no, you do not strictly need them.
However, and this is the big takeaway from the community feedback.
Right. However, based on that user reporting potential space slop when installing these specific Xtra Speed CVDs.
Using O-rings in those diff outdrive cups becomes a potentially beneficial modification if, and only if, you actually observe that slop after you assemble everything.
It really lines up with standard RC tuning practice. It's about optimizing the fit and feel, reducing wear, getting things as smooth as possible.
So the practical advice is, build it first without the O-rings, put the MIP diff in the gearbox, install the Xtra Speed CVDs into the diff outdrives and the wheel axles.
Then, before you button everything up, actually feel it out. Wiggle the drive shaft axially. Does it slide in and out of the diff cup noticeably? Rotate the wheels slowly by hand. Do you feel or hear a distinct clunk or chatter as the CVD barrel moves inside the cup?
If it feels nice and snug, with just minimal necessary movement, you're probably fine without them. But if you do feel that excessive slop or hear that clunking,
then adding an O-ring is probably a good idea. It's a simple way to address that play.
And the goal is just to cushion the end of the CVD barrel enough to take up the slack, but without causing any binding. You need the CVD to still slide just a tiny bit as the suspension compresses and extends.
Right, don't pack it so tight it can't move. If you decide to try them, the sources mentioned looking for O-rings sold for this purpose. Something around 2mm thick with maybe a 2mm inside diameter and a 6mm outside, often nitrile rubber.
You just pop one O-ring into the very bottom of each diff outdrive cup before you slide the CVD in. Then, crucially, test it again. Check the fit, move the suspension through its full range of travel, make sure nothing binds up.
You might even need to try slightly thinner or thicker O-rings to get it perfect. It's a bit of experimentation, part of the tuning process.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot for your particular build.
Okay, so summing it all up then.
Let's do a quick recap. Manufacturer docs for the MI hashtag 16210 diff and the product info for the Xtra Speed hashtag XSTA29121 CVDs. Both indicate O-rings for cushioning in the outdrive cups are not included and not officially required.
So, strictly speaking, to answer your original question, no, you don't need them according to the manufacturer.
But considering that real-world user feedback suggests you might encounter some slop with this specific Xtra Speed CVD set.
Using those O-rings can be a very beneficial tweak if you notice that play after assembly. It's an optimization, not a strict requirement.
It really comes down to assessing your specific parts once they're together and using a common RC tuning trick to refine the fit and performance. Upgrading to a ball diff and CVDs is already a big step up for these classic ORVs.
And this is just taking it that little bit further, dialing it in perfectly with a couple of tiny, inexpensive parts. It's part of the satisfaction of building and optimizing.
Absolutely. Taking something good and making it just that much better.
So the final verdict is kind of nuanced, isn't it? Officially, no. Practically, maybe. Check first. but it could help.
Yeah, and it's a great illustration of how combining components, even high-quality ones from different makers, sometimes needs that little bit of extra finessing to get everything working together absolutely perfectly.
That process of looking beyond the instruction sheet, observing how things actually fit and function, and making those small adjustments, that's really the core of optimizing any kind of mechanical system, really.
It is, and it shows how that layer of community knowledge and practical experience adds so much value on top of the manufacturer specs. Sometimes the best setup isn't just what's in the box.
Think about that. The gap between something just working and working optimally might literally be bridged by a couple of cents worth of tiny rubber rings.
We really hope this deep dive into all the sources you sent has given you the clarity you were looking for and helps you get that awesome Tamiya ORV running smoother and better than ever.